We are slaying monsters.
Don't let the ghosts and the ghouls disturb you, darling.
I can't think of a more appropriate time to talk about zombies than at 6:30 in the morning, which is the time that we're recording this podcast. Well, it's 6:34 right now a.m. So, Katie, thank you so much for getting up early with us to do this and
of course,
to get into the story of real life zombies.
Spoken about by real life zombies.
Exactly.
Except we have coffee.
Which will soon turn us into normal human beings,
Right.
hopefully.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a little bit like the story we're about to tell you. You wake up, you get your concoction, which is going to cure your zombie state, and then you become a, worker. Work a drone for a little while.
Yeah.
Yeah. See? It's just like real life.
There you go. Yep. This morning we were enjoying the beautiful Notting Hill coffee from Lewis Beach, Delaware.
Ooh.
They're not our
Special plug.
sponsors, but we are plugging them anyway, thanking them for many years of caffeine.
Yeah. Their coffee is awesome. It's incredible. Yeah. Katie, what kind of coffee are you drinking today? I
am drinking the hazelnut flavored Good and Gather coffee from Target.
Nice.
Because I drink shit coffee, but I drink half and half, and really my shit coffee and my half calf is an attempt to allow myself to drink the volume of coffee I would like to drink without having an extreme caffeine addiction.
That's good.
Yes.
Do you ever think about going decaf?
Fully?
No, not fully. Just like to supplement. Like, okay, you've had your caffeine, now decaf.
Oh, well, that's true. I mean, I drink half calf, and I have a little small Mr. Coffee pot that's like one of those little 5-cup guys. And I usually drink most, if not all of that on a morning. And then when I go into the office, I have the good stuff because we have one of those like fresh grind, fresh brew coffee makers at the office. It's fancy.
Do you remember when we were working together, Katie, and there was the person who would drop off the cases of Monster Energy drink? And we would all drink Monster Energy drink. I realized, because I was drinking one at like 2 p.m. every day, and I realized at one point when I didn't have one, I got a splitting headache. And I was like, wow, this has to stop. Obviously, I have some kind of addiction.
Not that Katie has an addiction, but they can happen with caffeine.
No, I'm just saying, like, that was when I was like, okay, I cannot drink the amount that I thought I could drink.
Yeah.
This is very bad.
Yeah, one of the reasons I switched to half calf is I would notice that if I didn't have any coffee or didn't have enough coffee, I would get like a splitting headache in the afternoon. Or I wouldn't say splitting, but I would be like, why do I have a headache at like 3 p.m.? And it would be from that. And now that doesn't really happen. I mean, it can, but not really. So I think cutting back has helped. But a story about those monsters. I've had one ever in my life.
Yeah.
It was when we worked together, and I decided to have one because all of my colleagues would have their monster break. And maybe an hour later, 2 hours later, our colleague looked at me and said, "Hey, Katie, do you realize you've been talking for like the last hour straight?" And he was just like, "We love you, and you can't have Monster anymore."
What the fuck is in that shit? Oh my god.
And that was the first and only time that I had a Monster Energy drink.
Oh my god. I would love to know what you were saying. This is why you should have a podcast, Katie. Katie and Monster.
Yeah.
Slaying monsters, but drinking monsters with Katie.
Drinking monsters with Katie. I feel like now I couldn't do it because I thought it was gross even then. I just had one because everybody was doing it.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't like it. I didn't really like it then either. It has a really strange flavor.
It tastes like everything bad. I used to work a 12-hour shift at a factory, and the only thing keeping me through it was Red Bull, and I can't do Red Bull anymore.
Yeah.
But
Well, thanks
morning.
thanks for coming to the beverage corner of our podcast.
yes, and now that we are beyond that,
yes,
we shall introduce ourselves. Go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to move to the breakfast food. So next we'll begin with pancakes and talk about pancakes.
What are your
this
opinions
morning.
on pancakes? No, actually, we're going to talk about zombies today because we are slaying monsters, and we have Matt TJ across the table.
Hey.
And we got Katie.
Hello.
And I'm EJ, and we are ambulatory, verbal, but not quite all there, just like our subjects in today's episode.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And it's actually, I mean, we talked about Monster Energy and the weird concoction that is, and that's not unconnected to this, because we're going to talk about not just zombies, but also potentially the way that you could create a zombie, not through magical means, but through an actual real pharmacological process, if that's possible.
Yeah, but we're not encouraging it.
I mean, yeah. Please don't make your own zombies. I feel like
Not
that's
good.
probably a bad thing.
Bad move.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Matt's not like giving you the recipe to go after someone. It's just kind of like, well, maybe you are giving
Well,
the recipe.
in a future episode, I actually will give the recipe to make a zombie, but don't do it.
Don't do it. Bad. No. Okay, now that our asses are covered, go ahead.
I think it's probably okay because the ingredients that you need to make a zombie are also really, really hard to get and kind of illegal. So, good luck.
Matt, have you heard of a thing called the internet?
Yeah.
Anyway, this story starts because in 1962, a man named Clairvius Narcisse died in a Haitian hospital from kidney failure. That alone wouldn't be remarkable, except that 20 years later, that same man reappeared alive and well. He claimed that he had been resurrected from the dead and forced to work for years on a sugar plantation. He toiled alongside several other enslaved zombies until a successful uprising, where they killed their overlord and freed themselves. Narcisse's incredible story is one of dark magic, arcane rituals, and the underbelly of organized crime in Haiti. And so the lore, legend, and truth of the zombies of Haiti will be the subject of our series.
Awesome. How old was he when it happened to him?
He was born in 1922, and he died, quote unquote, died in 62. So he was 40 when he died.
That's really
The first time.
suspicious then. Because, I don't know, 60 years old? Like, to be 60 after all that and to be, I don't know, to work for 20 years like that?
Okay, yeah. So he did not, I didn't say this in our opening paragraph, but he did not work for 20 years. He just disappeared for 20 years. He worked for 2 years. According to him, this is jumping way ahead, but according to him, he was turned into a zombie immediately after he died in 1962 when he was 40. He worked for 2 years on the sugar plantation until he was 42. Then they had a zombie uprising. They killed their master and they were able to free themselves. And then he stayed in the shadows for 18 more years before reappearing.
So, like, he died in a hospital.
Yes.
Like, he, officially died, and then he, showed back up, and we're sure it was the same person.
Someone named Clairvius Narcisse died from kidney failure in a Haitian hospital in 1962. That is a documented fact.
Okay.
Yeah, that is a documented fact. And then 20 years later, someone who was very clearly this man showed up. He introduced himself to his sister. He was able to give, details that only he would know about their upbringing. He had scars that matched young Clairvius. Yeah, something happened in between. Yes.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
I have thoughts, but let's keep going.
I know. And so obviously, like you jump to, well, maybe it wasn't him, right? Because that's the Occam's razor answer is that, well, maybe it wasn't Clairvius.
Sure.
Which would be a very easy and very quick episode for slaying monsters if there wasn't all this other shit that is actually kind of evidence for the fact that zombies are maybe really happening in Haiti. And this is not something that I say often. So let's go a little further here, yeah?
Yeah.
Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
I will entertain this idea.
Now, my primary source for this series is going to be Wade Davis's book, The Serpent and the Rainbow. I'll also be using Into the Zombie Underworld by Misha Berlinski, published in Epic Magazine, originally Men's Journal. And finally, Zombie Apocalypse, Holy Land, Haiti, Hollywood by Terry Ray, published through Temple Press. When we talk about zombies and the undead, there are two pretty distinct camps that they fit into. First, and probably most recognizable, you have the Walking Dead, like those featured in, well, The Walking Dead. You're lumbering, half-rotten corpses. They've been infected, usually by a virus or something transmissible. They crawl out of their graves. They feast on the living. If you get bitten by one, you're going to turn into a zombie. Maybe they also feed on your brains, That type of zombie was basically non-existent before George Romero's 1968 film Night of the Living Dead. That movie hits all of your zombie tropes. You have shambling undead come out of their graves. You have, it's an epidemic of zombies driving people into isolation. You have survivors trapped in outposts turning on each other, and then ultimately the final military intervention. I cannot talk about Night of the Living Dead enough. That film, it was a low-budget movie shot in grainy black and white, much like the newsreels that were coming out of Vietnam during the war. The protagonist, Ben, was a black man, becoming one of the most iconic people of color in the history of horror cinema, only to be executed without question by a bunch of militarized rednecks. There are no happy endings for humanity. Even though we've beaten the zombie threat, we've done so by turning our backs on our own humanity. It's just so fucking great.
It's a fantastic
It's
fucking
such
movie.
a good movie.
Have you seen it, Katie?
No.
It's worth it.
It is so good.
Your description is making me want to. And also, I feel like what you just said about the recording sort of like matching, or the quality of the film matching like the newsreels that were coming out of Vietnam. I feel, to me, that draws like Blair Witch Project parallels. Like using a type, making a movie out of something that feels like it's not supposed to be a movie, right? It feels like something you see in real life. That's cool.
Yeah, and, movies were color at that time. It was 1968. Things were coming out in color. So to see a black and white movie like that was unusual. And, it felt like all of this violence and all of this horror that people were seeing all the time that was really happening. And so it elevated the movie, kind of like Blair Witch, right? It elevated it a little bit more into this realm of like, this could be happening. The whole movie was so influential that film critic Robin Wood charts it as the birth of a new genre. Wood claimed that Night of the Living Dead showed that horror cinema could be more than just like camp and jump scares. It could deliver messages and themes as well as drama and tragedy, and leave us with a complex commentary to unravel. And I'd be remiss to skip over Romero's influence, too. Richard Matheson's I Am Legend. This book features vampires instead of zombies, but it's still post-apocalyptic horror, the isolation, the devolution of society in the quest for survival. These are all themes that Matheson explored.
Oh, I was going to say also, when you were describing it to me, I saw the influence in Get Out.
Oh, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you've seen Get Out, I take it?
I have seen Get Out. And I was
Such a
so
good
glad I
movie.
did. It was
Oh, man.
fucking insanely good.
Yeah,
Like,
so good.
I mean, terrifying. And I went and saw with two friends and colleagues, but we literally stood outside after the theater for like 2 hours and talked about it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what should happen, I feel like, with a movie like that. It's like, it's so thought-provoking.
Yeah.
George Romero, the director, even confessed his love for Richard Matheson's story, saying, "During the creation of Night of the Living Dead, I had written a short story, which I basically had ripped off of a Richard Matheson novel called I Am Legend." Now, despite all of this influence, the word zombie is never actually used in Night of the Living Dead. They call them the dead instead. The word was retroactively used and later became synonymous with The Walking Dead. A decade later, Romero wrote and directed a sequel, Dawn of the Dead, produced with famed horror director Dario Argento. And that film's international release title was Zombie, with an I, no E, Zombi, which would finally cement the phrase alongside this archetype of The Walking Dead. Now, other filmmakers were inspired by Romero and created their own films and interpretations of this character, this archetype. Return of the Living Dead, written and directed by Dan O'Bannon, depicted zombies as feasting on brains for the first time. O'Bannon had actually previously written Alien in 1979. And then, of course, Michael Jackson's Thriller in 1983 showed us that zombies could moonwalk as well. But we're going to set aside that entire archetype. I call them the Romero zombies. And that leaves us with this other archetype, and that's the voodoo zombie. Now, when I say voodoo, I'm using the phrase voodoo, V-O-D-O-U, the cultural pronunciation of the religion of voodoo, and not V-O-O-D-O-O, the more kind of colloquial pronunciation. And I'll explain why a little bit later. Voodoo zombies were raised from their graves under the control of a priest or a shaman, where the Romero zombies were the result of disease or virus. Voodoo zombies were created and controlled by magic. But much of this comes from and is retold stories of sorcery. So how much of this is actually based on real voodoo practices? Danielle M. Boaz, an anthropologist and the author of Voodoo, The History of a Racial Slur, details the real history of voodoo and our common misrepresentation of it. She writes, "The term voodoo originated in the United States and throughout most of its nearly 200-year history has been deployed largely by people in the United States to refer to the alleged spiritual practice of people of African descent in North America or abroad. It has been a mechanism for racist individuals to invoke all their anxieties and stereotypes about people of African descent, to call them uncivilized, superstitious, hypersexual, violent, and cannibalistic by merely uttering this single word."
A few years ago, I went to the Field Museum in Chicago.
Oh, I love that museum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they had an exhibit on voodoo and the religion, like a huge special exhibit. And it was really cool. I learned a lot. And I also learned a lot about how it is reduced and used as just sort of like a slur, as you said, in the US and other places too, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. It's just completely like misunderstood.
Yeah, it's really fascinating because it became weaponized, particularly after the events we're about to talk about, the Haitian Revolution and all of that, because for the first time you saw a populace of enslaved people who rose up, demanded, and actually achieved their own freedom. And that was really fucking scary for a whole bunch of American slave owners. And so they wanted very badly to demonize those people. And they did so, honestly, pretty effectively by creating what amounts to a completely false religion and false practices based sometimes on some real shit and sometimes on like little bits and pieces of other things. Like voodoo dolls are not in the voodoo religion at all. They're taken from the European poppet. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Anyway, so yeah, like they basically created this fake religion that they could use to point to people and say, look at how superstitious they are, even though that wasn't really the religion to begin with. True voodoo has its origins in West Africa from the Fon and Bantu people in what is modern-day Nigeria. These practices originate in the 16th century, when traditional African religions began to bump into Roman Catholicism. As the Atlantic slave trade forced the migrations of Africans to the Caribbean, these traditional religions picked up bits and pieces from what amounted to a melting pot of culture there. You know, you had French colonialists in Santo Domingue, now Haiti. You had early Freemasonry being talked about there too. And due to this blending, historians like Elizabeth McAllister call voodoo a creolized New World system. All right, you want to talk some history about Haiti? Let's get into it.
All right.
So
Yeah.
Haiti, then Hispaniola, had been a Spanish territory since Christopher Columbus landed there and assumed that it was India. At that point, the island was pretty sparsely populated with the Taino, who weren't exactly thrilled to see this dipshit and his fleet roll up on their doorstep. To make matters worse, Columbus established the town of La Navidad around Christmas in 1492. So imagine you have a horde of people who storm into your house for Christmas, drop all of their luggage, and say, we're going to live here for a little while. Now, hold on. My buddies are going to spend the night, and I'll come back with more friends a little bit later.
We're going to bring diseases for Christmas and all kinds of terrible things. Also, like, did they even celebrate Christmas, or was it just Christopher Columbus bringing Christmas?
The Taino people? They didn't celebrate
They did
Christmas.
not. So therefore,
Yeah. Also, you don't own this house anymore. We do now.
yeah, we're going to bring you our weird-ass religion that you've never heard of and bring our smelly Europeanness into your house and get you very sick.
Yeah. So, no surprise, the Taino, they weren't exactly thrilled about the prospect of having to host the Spanish indefinitely. When Christopher Columbus returned to Hispaniola a year later, he found La Navidad had been burned to the ground, and the 39 people he left behind were dead.
Total accident, just a Christmas tree accident.
Whoops.
Like, just oopsies.
I don't know, the tree just caught on fire, They were all trying to help, we don't know what happened.
This happened.
We were walking the dog at the time.
You know how it can happen. You got to
Yeah.
water those trees.
Yeah. Still, undeterred, Columbus founded a new city, La Isabela, in present-day Dominican Republic. Then, thanks to a combination of disease and brutality, Spanish colonialists nearly wiped out the Taino population, reducing them by nearly 95% over the next 20 years.
Jesus.
Imagine that, 95% over 20 years. By the end of the 16th century, the Spanish had mostly abandoned this island, Hispaniola, in favor of robbing the Mayan and Incan settlements in Central and South America at that point. They were mining them for gold and for other resources and shipping them back to Europe.
Yeah, I mean, to that point, I think that I was reading the Encyclopedia Britannica article last night, and I do believe that there was gold on the island that is now Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Basically, they mined it out, and so, or they forced the Taino people to mine it out, and then they were like, "Oh, there's no more gold here, so bye."
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, Spain, and yeah, it's not just Spain. I mean, it was all of the Europeans in the Caribbean just saw it as a massive resource that they had authority over. And they were manifesting their destiny to rip all of those resources out and take them back to Europe.
And people are mad that he has statues. Or sorry, let me say it again. People want him to remain as a statue. And people wonder why we're mad about that, why people are angry about that.
Right.
He didn't even come to what is now the continental United States. So, anyway.
Yeah.
So while all this was happening and Spain was moving this golden resources while largely ignoring Hispaniola, they decided to get into a pissing contest with the Dutch in Europe. And I'm condensing a whole lot of European history here, but basically Spain went to war with the Dutch. That caused a trade war with European Spain refusing to buy Dutch goods. As luck would have it, the Caribbean Spanish populations had fewer qualms, and so the Dutch trade in the Caribbean hit an all-time high. So basically, in Europe, Spain forbid you to trade with the Dutch. They technically forbid you to trade with the Dutch in the Caribbean too, but they didn't have as much authority there, and so Caribbean Spanish were just trading with the Dutch because they could. But because they were petty bitches, Spain sent troops to attack and fuck up their own colonies on Hispaniola because they were trading with the Dutch. Soldiers burned nearly half of their own outposts to the ground, and many of the colonists fled and joined the Dutch crews as pirates.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, because what else are you going to do? I mean, you're here, you don't have a whole lot of resources anyway. The Dutch come with resources, you've been trading with them for a while. Somebody makes a mandate that says you can't do it, but they don't really have authority over you, at least you don't want them to. And then when they find out you've been doing it, they come and they burn your house down? Are you really going to stay allied with those people?
That's truly wild. Are we still in the 1600s or have we moved into the 1700s at this point?
We're approaching the 1700s at this point.
Okay. I was just checking in on the timeline. But there's still a lot of violence in the world today, absolutely. But I think we really forget how violent it used to be. If people didn't like something, they were just like, okay, I'm just going to burn it down and take it.
Yeah, I'm destroying it. And it's mine now.
Yeah, or I'm not even going to take it. It's like, if this can't be mine, nobody can have it. We're just destroying it.
Pretty much, yeah. So you now have this burned out husk that used to be Hispaniola. And that became the perfect site for the growing number of pirates to swoop in and take over. Unable to hold the territory any longer, Spain basically threw up its hands and relinquished the western half of the island to France, who established Saint-Domingue. Oh, there's going to be French pronunciation all over this. Over the next century or so, this would grow into France's most important colony in the Caribbean. By the end of the 18th century, half of the sugar and coffee consumed in Europe came from Saint-Domingue. This required a massive expansion of their workforce, by which I mean African slave labor. This single island accounted for a third of the African slave trade in the Caribbean. And these laborers brought with them their religions, like voodoo, which they continued to practice.
I read in the Britannica that at the time of the revolution, there were 550,000 people on the island. 500,000 of them were Africans who had been forced to come there in the slave trade. Only 50,000 were other people. Only 32,000 were European colonists. The other 24,000 were free people who were of mixed heritage. 500,000 people being enslaved by 32,000 people.
It's crazy on a relatively small island. Well, it doesn't matter how big the island is. The island is an island. And so to me, it kind of makes perfect sense why there were so many revolutions, and I'm jumping ahead, but why there were so many, and then somewhat successful rebellions and populations that sprung up from the rebellions. And it's more isolated. And I think just from a strategic standpoint, it definitely, I think the terrain helped, opposed to the US, where it was basically you're fucking lucky if you can just get the fuck out and run north. Like, that's it. Like, you can't. It's so much, like, it's just different. It's just different.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you had a whole massive population of people who would escape. They were called Maroons. We'll talk about them shortly. Who could run into the hills and the forests there and just kind of hide out. And they formed their own colonies then. And they started actually attacking the established settlements.
Fuck yeah.
And yeah, trying to fuck shit up. But also, I mean, it was vengeance, but it was also like they needed resources.
Yeah.
So they would attack and they would get food and they would get, what they needed to survive from these places.
They're fascinating groups of people, like the stuff. I'm excited for you to get into that, but okay.
So they brought their religion of voodoo with them. And now you have it interacting with French Catholicism. So as French Catholicism is growing, voodoo mixed with it too, and they formed this kind of hybrid religion. Now, conditions were brutal for these enslaved people. Henri Christophe, his personal secretary, who served half of his life enslaved, wrote this: "Have they not hung men with their heads downward, drowned them in sacks, crucified them on planks, buried them alive, crushed them in mortars? Have they not forced them to eat their own excrement? And having flayed them with a lash, have they not cast them alive to be devoured by worms, or onto anthills, or lashed them to stakes in the swamp to be devoured by mosquitoes?" That's a small section. This goes on and on and on.
Jesus.
Yeah. Given this brutal treatment, it was basically impossible for the laborers to start their own families on the island. This, historians think, kept their ties to voodoo strong because there wasn't a new generation being born there. Instead, entire populations arrived on ships, brought their religion with them, then were worked until they died, and then a whole new population came. People were dying before they could reproduce on Saint-Domingue. Meanwhile, white colonists actually had their own unrest, because there was a very sharp divide between the plantation owners and the white workers, too. You had this rich, aristocratic type of plantation owner, and then the white laborer who was in charge of the enslaved population. And this disparity bred frustration with poor whites who were dying of disease and struggling to make ends meet, while the aristocracy could flee back to France when things went bad, like a yellow fever outbreak. They would just fuck off and go back where it was safe and force everybody else to stay there. Historian Paul Fragasse writes, "The poor whites couldn't stand the rich whites. The rich whites despised the poor whites. The middle-class whites were jealous of the aristocratic whites. The whites born in France looked down upon the locally born whites. The mixed race envied the whites, despised the blacks, and were despised by the whites. Haitian-born residents regarded those from Africa as savages. Everyone, quite rightly, lived in terror of everyone else. Haiti was hell, but Haiti was rich."
That's a very powerful, much more eloquently powerful way of putting what I read, which is that racial and class tensions on the island were multi-layered and intense. There's a lot of like nuance and divisions between like who you were, where you were born, what your skin looked like.
Yeah, basically you had all of these people shoved together, forced to work together, and immediately breaking off into their separate groups where they felt like they were not safe exactly, but they could at least belong. And this was rampant across all of Haiti during this time period. But you can only push people for so long under these conditions. Those who could escape from their slavers formed their own colonies called the Maroons. This is what we were talking about. And these factions very quickly turned violent against their former oppressors. The most famous Maroon leader was Francois McCandle, a one-armed man originally from Guinea. Now, McCandle lost his right arm in a sugarcane press. Unable to continue working on the plantation, he was instead assigned to be a herder for the copious amount of cattle on the island. And that provided him with the opportunity to escape because, he was out just watching the cattle. The plantation owners assumed that it wasn't worth the time chasing down a one-armed man. And so he disappeared into the mountains. Now, McCandle was a highly devoted practitioner of traditional voodoo, and he often prepared gift bags of medicinal herbs that he would give his allies. Over the next 10 years, he became kind of a religious leader among the Maroons. They looked up to him, they followed his guidance to create their own herb blends, not just for medicinal practices, but allegedly for malicious ones as well. According to legend, McCandle was a master poisoner. Allegedly, he directed potent toxins be delivered to the livestock he used to manage. The cows then caught diseases which spread to the white population. And fearing that the enslaved were poisoning them, they panicked.
Oh, wow. So the illness that the cow had could get passed to the person when they ate the cow, probably?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow.
Do we think that this actually happened? Which it could. I mean, you could poison cows. Or do you think it was just an early instance of like bad cow disease or something like that? Where like an early instance of disease jumping from animals to people?
We don't definitively know.
Yeah.
I suspect, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I suspect that it was probably a disease that broke out independently of anything that McCandle was doing. And it just got blamed on him because he was a dangerous individual.
Master Poisoner, was that like an actual title that he had within the community? Or is that just like he became really good at poisons?
No, he just became really good at poisons. He was an herbalist. Okay. So he understood how to, if you had an ailment or something like that, you would go to him and he would tell you what herbs you would need and concoctions to blend and all of this stuff. And so he ultimately, he's a very early example of the voodoo bokor. We call them kind of sorcerers, the magic men, if you will, in the religion.
I think that regardless of whether it was true or not that he poisoned the cattle and then the people, it's a great legend and story that can strike fear in the hearts of these privileged white people and probably did its job. Like whether it's true or not, like I don't know if he liked that, but I don't know if like Francois was like, oh good, they think it's me, cool. I just think that sowing that unrest and that worry in that white population was probably like ultimately good for any kind of rebellion that there would be. I don't know.
No, historians point to him as being the start. He was the flame that lit the fire.
Cool.
Yeah. Wade Davis writes about the poison and says, to their horror, whites found themselves in a trap of their own making, dependent on the very people who were agents of their doom. The poison appeared everywhere, baked in bread, in medicine vials, in kegs of ale, sometimes from the soup, perhaps the tea, wine, even fruit picked from the trees. The terror of the whites gave way to rage, and innocent people were flayed alive. The slightest suspicion of collaboration with the poisoners meant a horrible death.
Wow. I mean, to me, this sounds like something even more. Like it sounds like maybe there was something in the water or something like that where it was like everyone, where it's in everything, right? It's like, okay, well, what are you using for everything?
Yeah.
Fruit, you're maybe washing it off in water, or beer, you're making it with water. I don't know. I think that's really interesting. Or, it's the 1700s. We understand disease a little bit better than we used to, but not a lot. Like it's also possible that people weren't getting sick from all these other things. They were getting sick from beef and then spreading it to their friends and family. I'm not sure. But like, regardless, that sounds like a great example of the way that like hysteria just spreads.
Absolutely. I think on the heels of that, we're talking about Europeans that are from Europe that, well, obviously, of the 1700s in a tropical environment that they're not super, super familiar with. Yeah, maybe they're a generation in or something, but they're not native to that area at all. And we know that Europeans did not have really good hygiene, and they didn't really understand how to be safe. I think that it was just a perfect storm of fish out of water. You're doing it all wrong. And I don't know, like it could be everything, but
it makes me think about the Salem witch trials where, one incident or two starts to snowball and then all of a sudden everything is a witch. You're always looking for, like, is that witchcraft? Is that? And so I think something similar happened here where every single person who fell ill was suddenly linked to this alleged poisoning that was being done by this mountain voodoo man.
yeah. And actually, you mentioned that. It makes me wonder how much the witch trials had influence over this, because that would have happened before this went down, probably, right? Because you said we're going into the 1700s now.
Yeah, we're over probably a little less than a century after the witch trials.
Okay. Yeah,
Certainly,
could be.
witches were very popular in the European mind at the time, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I also think it speaks to the larger issue that we've already touched on, which is that they fucking knew that they were outnumbered by people that they were brutally oppressing.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you might believe that the human beings that you are enslaving are not people, they're savages, whatever, like, you've made up in your head that like makes this okay, that you're doing it, that it's fine to treat people like this, but you're doing it. Like, I think it's that like really deep-seated cognitive dissonance of like, we are in charge, but we are treating these people like this. And if they ever decide together that they don't want to be treated like this, we're fucked because we are massively in the minority. I think that this panic speaks to that deep-seated knowledge that they've pushed way down, but is there.
And I think you're right, Katie, and I think that their persecution of him after his arrest speaks very much to that. So they were determined to make an example, and the magistrate ordered McCandless's arrest. After a trial that lasted only a few days, he was found guilty of creating and distributing poisons and inciting a rebellion. There's a historian, John Gregarious, who believes that McCandless's voodoo was merely medicinal practices, and he might have incited a rebellion, but he didn't actually call for poisoning anyone. Gregarious points out that colonists had been suffering from periodic outbreaks of anthrax in their livestock, which likely explained all of these sudden deaths. They hadn't been poisoned, they'd been eating tainted meat. But regardless, McCandless was ordered to be executed. They treated him as both a witch and an example, and the magistrate slated him to be burned at the stake. Now, according to the rumors, while he was burning, he screamed at the sky before breaking free of his bonds and flinging his burning body out of the pyre. Some people said that he was forced back by the soldiers. Others claimed that he escaped back into the mountains, never to be seen again. And to me, this is fascinating, if barbaric. McCandless being publicly executed, but rising from the ashes, phoenix-like, feels very much like this all-powerful voodoo priest breaking through the bonds of death. True or not, I think you can very easily make the case for this being an early genesis of the Haitian zombie motif. It's a sorcery, a magic so powerful that it stretches beyond the natural bounds of life and death. Now, McCandless wouldn't be the last freed man to lead an uprising. In the late 1760s, a big, imposing Muslim cleric ended up on one of Haiti's slave ships. This was Duddy Bookman, called Bookman by his compatriots as a reference to his religion. Bookman was made a coach driver, so he delivered mail provisions and things between the different plantations on the island. And that allowed him to stay connected with what was happening across all of these territories. And he's a smart guy. He started transferring messages from place to place. He had this opportunity to network in a way that no one had ever been able to do before. And so he began disseminating messages of revolution. These were also delivered to the freed Maroons, who were already, inflicting their own kind of unsuccessful mini incursions against the plantations. News of these impending revolutions soon reached the voodoo mambo, or priestess, Cecily Fatiman. Born into slavery, but very likely educated, Fatiman had encountered the Enlightenment movement during her early life. This is going on in Europe, all of this idea of do we have to be slaves to God, to a king, a queen, all of the things that sparked the American Revolution.
While also enslaving people, ironically.
Well, yes, but
had to put that in there. I'm sorry.
It's just the idea.
But we can't actually do our own work. I mean,
no,
come on.
no,
Right.
No, we can't be introspective at all.
Fatiman took these ideas of liberty, constitutional government. She began preaching on liberty, equality, and fraternity. Literally, liberty. Did I do a good job, Katie?
It's liberté, égalité, fraternité.
Those things. Liberty, equality, and unity. The same movement that would lead to the American and French revolutions just a few years earlier had now sparked in the Caribbean. And so, on a stormy night in 1791, a huge gathering of laborers and Maroons met at Bois Cayman. Katie, maybe? Bois Cayman?
How do you spell it?
B-O-I-S?
Not boys.
Bois.
Yeah.
Bois. Met
Cayman,
at Bois.
it's like Cayman wood.
Yeah,
basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Met
the
at
woods.
Bois.
Yeah.
It's alligator woods is what it is.
Oh, okay.
The alligator woods. Yep.
Cool.
So thanks to Duddy Bookman, who's been, relaying all of these messages, all this stories of revolution, he and Fatiman organize this gathering in the woods. Now, while there, Fatiman leads a ceremonial ritual, sacrificing a pig and offering its blood to the people gathered. There was an invocation to the Loa, one of the thousands of voodoo gods that served as emissaries between the people and the supreme being. And Bookman spoke to the assembled and said, "The God of the whites pushes them to crime, but he wants us to do good deeds. But the God who is so good orders us to vengeance. He will direct our hands and give us help. Throw away the image of the God of the whites who thirst for our tears. Listen to the liberty that speaks in all our hearts."
Beautiful.
With that, the board was set, and war was declared. Fatima declared that Bookman would be the commander-in-chief of the rebellion. The next night, he led a regiment to the No Sugar Plantation, and they burned it to the ground and killed the plantation owners. This would become the only successful slave revolt in recorded history. It took 30 years. For 30 years, there was war in Haiti. Although the plantation owners had prepared for revolt, they had only expected small outbursts, kind of what they had been receiving from the Maroons. Instead, Katie, what you've been talking about, massive numbers of enslaved people rose up, completely outnumbering their oppressors, sometimes 40-1. Seeing blood in the water, Britain and Spain also sent troops to the region, further escalating the conflict because, of course, European countries loved fucking each other over in the 1700s.
I was reading on another website, I think it's called the HaitianRevolution.com. I want to get it because basically it is a project of a student at Brown, It's a timeline. One of the reasons that it was successful is because the enslaved people were incredibly organized. Like, this was meticulously planned. It wasn't just, and of course they did gather other enslaved people along the way who, like, as they went to different plantations and burned them down, they would get more people. But there were a lot of people who were already involved. They all knew what they were supposed to do. Like, it was meticulously timed. Like, everyone understood the marching orders. Like, everybody knew when they were supposed to do it. Literally, some of the plantation owners were so stupid. Apparently they had been tipped off a couple of days before the meeting in Alligator Woods, and this was a quote from the site. Everything's sourced. One of the plantation owners said that he would put his head on the line if this were true, because he just didn't believe it. He didn't believe that his people, his enslaved people, could be mixed up in such a thing, because it wasn't just like field workers. It was the people who had reached more trusted levels, like house servants, people driving coaches and carriages, people who had been in charge of like more important things. Like, it was just a complete alignment, complete infiltration across like the entire, I think the North is where it started. So anyway, I just wanted to emphasize that, because I think a lot of times when we think of rebellions, it feels like a small group of upstarts. And sometimes that's true. Of course, it always starts there with one or two people, bookmen, who's going around and starting to recruit people. But like, that type of intense organization is, I think, required. And I also think it's a story that doesn't get told about peoples who, especially enslaved peoples who rise up, that the amount of organization and the depth to which people were in despair but decided to do something about it, that I just wanted to talk about it, because I was reading about it and I was like, holy shit, that's hard to do. It's hard to do now when we have sophisticated communication technology. It's a lot easier to communicate with people. People have a device in their pockets that they carry around with them. But to do that in the 1700s, where you're literally having to pass messages, secret messages, on paper, orally, and then for all of those people to be committed and do the thing that they said they were going to do at the time that they said they were going to do it, like, that's just incredible. And props to them, because fuck that shit.
Fuck that, exactly. And like, knowing that if they got caught, they would have a horrible death. Like, it's just, the stakes were so high.
But to that extent too, your death was horrible no matter what.
Oh, absolutely.
People, there were these. So the way that McCandle lost his arm was in a sugar press, where it would, I guess it had these rollers. I don't fully understand, but his arm was like crushed and destroyed in the sugar press. Like, there was a good chance that you were going to die a horrible death just working. So why not die trying to do something better? I understand that logic.
Oh, yes.
And I'm always fascinated, because I think that a lot of times in retrospect, the narrative, or at least the impression, is that these enslaved people who were coming from Africa were always just kind of, regular, normal people, individuals, whatever. But, Bookman was a cleric. He knew how to organize people. He knew how to get people aligned under a message, and how to communicate and amp people up, get them excited and ambitious to do things and believe in themselves. You were bringing over princes.
Yeah.
Warriors.
Warriors.
You were bringing over fighters.
Scholars.
Yeah,
Yes.
like people who were very established in their communities were coming here and were ready to do this shit.
Yeah, the white racism was just like insanely underestimating these really brilliant people.
Yes, absolutely.
I looked it up to make sure. It's the HaitianRevolution.com, but it is a Haitian Revolution timeline that this person started as a project at Brown University in 2008, but has kept up the website. It used to live on Brown University's website, and now it has its own URL, but it's just like a detailed timeline of the Haitian Revolution that he continues to update. So I check it out. Lots of really good information. If our listeners are interested in learning more.
And one other thing I'll plug too, to get a really cool deep dive into the Haitian Revolution and Haitian's history, I highly recommend, I've said this before on the podcast, but I highly recommend people picking up Black as Fuck History by Michael Harriot. I don't know if you've read it, Katie.
No, but I know him.
Okay. I just think the book is amazing for many, many reasons. It's not just about Haiti. It's about just all of Black history from his perspective and historical, obviously. It's absolutely amazing. So anyway, definitely recommend that book too.
There's no great segue into this, but Duddy Bookman died during the first few months of this conflict. His head was put on display in the hopes of showing the superiority of the French army. But no surprise, that only galvanized the other side. Jean-Francois Papillon, a Maroon himself, took over Bookman's position and maintained the unity and the message of this fight. And he was joined by two other revolutionaries, Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines. Rapidly running out of money, Napoleon agreed to sell part of America to fund his war efforts and signed the Louisiana Purchase. But that was too little too late. Less than a year later, France abandoned the island, and Dessalines declared independence on January 1st, 1804. They renamed the region Haiti from the Taino Land of the Mountains. Haiti became the second independent country in the Americas after the United States of America. Despite that, the United States of America was unwilling to recognize Haitian independence. Remember, this is just a few years after the U.S. fought and overthrew their own oppressors, but slavery was still a major industry in the country. The Federalists were concerned that revolts would spread to their own soil. And Thomas Jefferson basically ignored Haitian independence, a stance that would continue all the way until 1862.
Disgusting.
Over the next 100 years, struggles for diplomacy hindered the new country's success. German influencers attempted to stabilize the economy and enrich themselves in the process. By the turn of the 20th century, Haiti found itself in a civil war. Between 1911 and 1915, 7 different presidents were either killed or exiled.
Holy shit. And that's well, only 1 year into the First World War. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
But yeah, okay, That's a lot.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's a German presence in Haiti at this point, and I'm skipping over a whole bunch of Haitian history. We'll come back to that a little bit later. But fearing a German presence on the eve of World War I, U.S. investors replaced Haiti's banks with ones of their own, effectively taking over Haitian treasury. The country fell into debt, and the U.S. swooped in and took up occupancy, claiming to help stabilize, but really because everyone was afraid of the Germans. They meaning the Americans, would remain there until the Great Depression in 1934. As part of that occupation, FDR basically wrote the Haitian Constitution himself, including a passage that allowed foreign governments to own land there. The U.S. passed their new constitution through an electoral college, with less than 5% of Haitians actually getting the chance to vote. The U.S. was finally removed in 1934 with the election of Steenio Vincent, a staunch opponent of U.S. occupation. So, as these U.S. soldiers returned to their home country, they brought with them stories from the Caribbean. And this encouraged tourism, with U.S. citizens starting to dip their toes into a country and a culture that was extremely foreign to them. One of these was William Seabrook, an occultist and contemporary of Aleister Crowley. By which I mean Seabrook was a fucking weirdo and one of the few people that Crowley was actually scared of.
Whoa.
Ooh.
Yeah. If you're scaring Aleister Crowley, you're fucking weird.
Yeah.
It's a high bar.
But this guy is going to be the first person to write on Haiti, and he's also the first person to start to build the mythology of voodoo from an outsider's white perspective. See, so Seabrook was a cross between a travel writer and an adventurer. His book, Adventures in Arabia, detailed his time living among the Bedouin tribes. He wrote a very detailed account of Muslim religious practices and customs, and participated in several of them. He later would go on to do something similar in Africa, claiming to have joined tribal rituals and eaten human flesh with a band of cannibals. Although, later on, he admitted that he'd actually been given ape flesh instead, never human. But just to show you how weird this dude was, his interest was piqued in cannibalism, and he pressured a medical student to give him some flesh from a real cadaver in America. Allegedly, he cooked it and ate it and claimed that it tasted, quote, like good, fully developed veal.
Yuck.
Ugh.
While it's not directly connected to our story, Seabrook was also into S&M and enjoyed bondage, both being restrained and restraining others. While undergoing rehab, Seabrook was lashed to a bed in an asylum. Allegedly, he asked the doctor to make his bonds tighter before getting, quote, excited locally.
Excited locally. That's a great term. Oh my God.
I feel like some romance novelist needs to use that now.
Definitely.
The famous photographer Man Ray once house sat for Seabrook and wrote that his duties house sitting, normally you would think, walk my dog, feed the cat, whatever. No, Seabrook, that involved unshackling and feeding the woman he was keeping in bondage in his house.
Wow.
I do not know how willing or unwilling she and Man Ray were during this little game. Remember, kiddies, safe, sane, and consensual.
Like, listen, some people are into extreme BDSM, so it's possible that this woman was there consensually.
Sure.
But, like, if she was not, Man Ray was just like, I guess I'm doing this. Like, don't you then become, like, complicit in some sort of, like, kidnapping that's going on? Like,
absolutely.
I feel like more questions should have been asked.
Yeah.
That whole group of artists, we don't have time to get into that, but that whole group of artists, Man Ray and his contemporaries and stuff, were fucking weirdos.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And Seabrook is one of these guys. Anyway, so he was one of those starry-eyed tourists who spent time in Haiti. And he wrote about his trip in a second book called The Magic Island, which was published in 1929. It's like half travel memoir, half fantasy book, and it's most notable for a chapter called Dead Men Working in the Cane Fields. In this chapter, Seabrook sat down with a Haitian farmer named Polynice, who tells him fireside ghost stories. These include, as he puts it, tales of fire hags, demons, werewolves, and vampires, while a full moon rising slowly flooded his sloping cotton fields and the dark rolling hills beyond. Seabrook took the opportunity to ask about another legend he had heard, the zombie. Suddenly, Polynice, who had been just kind of treating everything like folklore, very casually, fireside ghost stories, He turned deadly serious, and he replied, "No, my friend, no. There are too many true cases. At this very moment in the moonlight, there are zombies working on this island, less than 2 hours' ride from my own habitation. We know about them, but we do not dare to interfere so long as our own dead are left unmolested." Polynice went on to explain that the Haitian American Sugar Company employed a number of zombies, lent out by a man named Ty Joseph. Allegedly, Joseph and his wife had dragged from their peaceful grave to slave for him in the sun. He was actually pulling people out of their graves and forcing them into labor. They worked tirelessly. They ate only boiled plantains. And whatever magic Joseph had used kept these corpses in a kind of suspended animation, prevented them from rotting, from decay. He kept them working and kept earning off of this small army of the dead.
Is this like some Frankenstein shit? Like, we're calling them zombies, but I'm getting like, reanimation vibes.
I guess it depends on how you do it, right? Like, if you do it through, like, electricity, it's Frankenstein. If you do it through other means, maybe it's a zombie. I never thought about the connection, though, between, like, Frankenstein and zombies. Like, that's so crazy.
Yeah.
Frankenstein, I think Frankenstein, if you're going to make a connection, Frankenstein is a built corpse, though.
Oh, that's true. He's assembled. Yeah.
Okay, that's true. I didn't think about that. Whereas a zombie is a complete, it's just like...
It's an individual. Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, I guess Frankenstein, zombies, at least these Haitian zombies, would be raised through a magical means, or at least a chemical means.
Right.
Whereas Frankenstein is, I guess electrical, scientific, right?
Yeah. I mean, arguably to me, chemical means is scientific also, but
True.
But anyway, okay.
So anyway, Joseph's wife took pity on these zombies one day, and she unknowingly fed them some salted pastries. Salt, a pure spice, broke the control that Joseph had on the horde, and the reanimated workers realized that they were dead and that they had been enslaved. They broke free and they ran to find their loved ones. But, I mean, as you can expect, they weren't exactly met with open arms. You had these dead people pouring through the streets of the market and people screaming and running. Traumatized, the zombies realized that they were hopeless, caught between two worlds, but unable to exist in either one. They fled back to their graves and they began digging themselves back into the ground. At the touch of the earth of their resting place, the reanimation spell broke and the corpses collapsed and rotted into decay.
Wow.
I mean, I love this story, but if a bunch of dead people had run through a market in the mid 20th century, I feel like we would know about it.
For reals. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think Seabrook might have shared some of your skepticism, Katie. So he said, "Hey, can I see these zombies myself?" Polynice agreed, and the next day they traveled to a nearby plantation. Seabrook compared these workers to a lobotomized dog he had once seen, capable of moving, but devoid of any understanding. So he actually saw them. He saw these people working, and he described them like this. They were plotting like brutes, like automatons. Their eyes were the worst. It was not my imagination. They were, in truth, like the eyes of a dead man, not blind, but staring, unfocused, unseeing. The whole face, for that matter, was bad enough. It was vacant, as if there was nothing behind it. It seemed not only expressionless, but incapable of expression.
He said they were like lobotomized dogs. Mm-hmm. What if they just were lobotomized humans? What if the fucked up shit that was going on at this plantation was they were kidnapping people, lobotomizing them, and then like making them work? I just feel like that's, in terms of like scientific shit that was going on, like lobotomy was a big practice in the mid 20th century.
That's an interesting thought. As far as I know, that's not something anyone has explored in terms of it. You might be thinking a little bit too complicated.
That fair. They could also just be drugged out of their fucking minds.
And I mean, that's closer to the conclusion that ultimately Wade Davis will come to during his research. Yeah.
It's a good theory, Katie.
But he went and saw them. That's wild.
To Seabrook, these were the walking dead. Corpses magically driven to toil even after they breathed their final breath. Horrified, he fled the scene, taking with him the first inklings that would become our modern zombie mythos. Now, this was 1929. For years, there was no corroborating evidence for Seabrook's accounts. Until a man who claimed to be a zombie came forward in the 1980s. But we will talk about him and the complex interplay of legend and fact in our next episode.
Yeah, all right.
Oh my gosh.
This is so interesting.
This is a really wild series because most of the time, when I start out and I do a series, I'm like, this probably isn't true. Or, we've done like Die Glocke. We're like, well, obviously the Nazis didn't have a fucking flying saucer, right? Like very clearly they didn't.
Right.
This is one of those rare instances where during the course of all of this, at the end of it, I'm kind of like, this might be true. Like I don't really think that there are legions of zombies working in sugarcane fields, but I do think that this has probably happened from time to time, and it's wild. It's wild. That is your overview of the history of Haiti. We'll talk even more about the history as we continue to move through this series, but cool. But that's the culture in that country that brought about the beginning of our zombie mythos.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you all so much for listening, and we'll be back next time with part 2 of the zombies of Haiti.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Be safe out there. Thanks for listening to Slaying Monsters, the 40 in History podcast. If you like the podcast, there's a couple ways you can show your support. You can tell your friends, you can leave us a rating and review on your podcast platform, or you can head over to slayingmonsterspodcast.com and click on the Support Us button to leave a donation. For questions, suggestions, and other feedback, reach out to us, slayingmonsterspodcast@gmail.com, and stay up to date by following us on socials at Slaying Monsters Podcast. Your support helps us grow, and we are truly grateful to have our listeners and community.